Greetings, welcome back to my channel. This is Stasia Bliss. We're talking about Kundalini awakenings, life force management on this channel. There is so much life force today outside. The wind is really howling and blowing. Maybe you can hear it, maybe you can't. Yesterday I was standing by a raging river. Today it's the wind element. It's also Wednesday, which is Mercury, the mind, when I'm recording this, which is the air element also. And I also have been studying Ayurveda to be an Ayurvedic practitioner eventually, and was studying about Vata today and how Vata, the air element, is the most important of all the elements because nothing could move without it. So there's a message in here for us. It's also making me think of a conversation I had today, that our biggest obstacle is the mind. And actually in Ayurveda, they attribute 80 diseases, 80 ailments to a Vata disorder, where only there's 40 with Pitta disorder, the fire element, and only 20 with Kapha. So most of the elements can be attributed to an imbalance of the mind, really, what it comes down to. And that's why Tantra is such an important element in the trifecta of yoga, Ayurveda, and Tantra, because that is the mental discipline. It's disciplined to liberate. And it seems counterintuitive because we think of discipline as these hard structures. But to discipline ourselves to open the boundaries, to discipline ourselves to see things from a wider vantage point, and to do so often. This is like a medicine for the mind. Okay, so if most elements are rooting from an imbalance of the air element, an imbalance of Vata is a mixture of air and space, actually air and ether. So it's our spiritual nature and our mental nature. Okay, so there's, in the bodies of yoga, there are sheaths, there are layers called koshas. Okay, and before we access the pure, unconditional bliss body of divine love, there is Vijnana Maya kosha, which is the wisdom body, the wisdom mind, the higher mind. And we've been talking about this in a lot of videos. And there's also then Mana Maya kosha, which is Manas, it's the lower mind. It's like the ego mind. So what we're seeing in our culture and in the world and even in our lives is a leaning more toward Manas, more toward Mana Maya kosha, and the mind, the lower mind and ego, than to the higher mind. And there's a lot of good, religious and spiritual folk that turn it to God, right? Turn it over to God. But how many of us can enact that God mind within ourselves? So that's the part of this process with awakening and life force energy that we get to work on, and why Kundalini yoga is so powerful of a practice. And all the work that I love to do is about cueing the mind to think in a higher dimension, to look at life from a greater vantage point, to take a different look at things, and is the subject of my up-and-coming book on the shifting paradigms. And I'm not quite ready to announce that yet, but there's a little preview. Because we are in a shifting paradigm, and actually we're constantly in a shifting paradigm, and every new Kundalini awakening is another paradigm shift. Paradigm is our worldview. So we come into this world like this, we see it all, and then we get limitations placed upon us to help us, grow the ego, help us become aware of our bodies and really understand form and embodiment. And then within the form, now we again have to return to the higher mind whilst being able to hold as much of that in this body. And when we can't, maybe that's the death passage from the body. But so I'm thinking of this bridge, this rope being thrown from Manas to Vijnana Maya kosha, from Mana Maya kosha to Vijnana, from the lower mind to the higher mind. what the Bhagavad Gita is really talking about, especially Paramahamsa Yogananda does a great way of translating that in his version, his translated version, how the lower mind thinks that it's king of the body realm, but it must recognize the higher mind, the God mind. That's the awakened mind, that's the journey of Kundalini, and it fights on the field of Kurukshetra, which is the battlefield of the mind, the thoughts of the mind, the sense organs, what we think is going on in the body. We're fighting against that with only this limited capacity, right? So Tantra is like liberate and then give a new limit, liberate and give a new limit until you can hold bigger and bigger. You're not just completely removing limitations and going mad. We have to do it incrementally, line upon line, right? We have to hold bigger truths consistently. And so there's a lot of stories that I like to tell that are liberating stories, and a lot of the mythology stories are that way too. It's like, whether or not they're true, do they continue to liberate your mind? Do they continue to stretch you to a bigger perspective of what's possible in your life and what God really is? Because God is undescribable. The one life, the one universe, the source of love cannot be contained in any word, unless it is in the resonance field when you Om, where you are connecting. But again, it's a feeling, it's a knowing. It's not like a concept per se that we can write around. It's something that's unwritable. So the more we can utilize story or mythology or parable or so forth to continue to liberate. Like, what if I were to tell you, oh, these planets that you know are actually not out there anymore. That's just a hologram. We're in a completely different part of the universe. But most people aren't ready to hear that because that would blow their minds too much. But whether or not that's true, what I just said, is not the point. That's not the point. It doesn't matter, and you shouldn't seek to find out necessarily. It's the very act of letting yourself go there for a second that is the liberating factor. That is the mind stretch. And if you can just stretch a little bit more than before I said that, and even be like, I wonder, that curiosity, that awe, it expands that sphere of possibility and it allows for more, it allows for change, right? Vata is also one of the main elements in tamas and rajas, and we talked about that before, of sattva, rajas, and tamas. Rajas is the change element. Tamas is inertia and the destruction, the breakdown. These are essential to get us back to the higher mind. We must go through changes. We must grow. We must stretch ourselves. I'm also talking about this in my up and coming book, that, what is sustainability? Sustaining is not staying the same. It's being able to continually adapt to the times, to grow with the times, to shift perspective, to stay in the body. Sustainability equals longevity. So there's some thoughts for your lower and your higher mind to gnaw upon. Sorry it took me so long to jump on here today. I have been really sitting with what is the message of today. And I do that every day. Sometimes it comes right in the morning, and sometimes when I'm out walking or later, or through a conversation with somebody else, or through a question. So if you have a question, please do leave it in the comments or send me an email. If you want to work with me, please go to my website. It's down below also. I appreciate you being here. I hope that it's helpful. I hope just one thing I said is helpful. That's all that I hope. And if it is, why don't you just give me a thumbs up, and maybe if you want to hear more, subscribe, and share if you think it's worth sharing. I appreciate you very much, and much love to you, and namaste, friends. Looking forward to another road trip coming up next week, so make sure you follow along so you see all the places that I go in this great country, and we talk about Kundalini awakenings wherever we go. All right, love you.